"Cover it," the Duke of Marlow said, "before my aunt comes down and calls the physicians again." His steward did not move. Rayburn stood before the easel with the lamp lifted, and his face had gone the careful blank of a servant who has just seen something he was not meant to see. On the canvas, still wet at the edges, was a woman's face. Gray eyes, a plain dark braid, a chin lifted as though she were arguing with the rain. "That is the 7th, your grace." "The 9th." Alaric set down his brush and wiped his hands on a rag that had once been a good cravat. "The others are in the north passage under sheets, and you may tell the household I know precisely how many there are, and that I am not mad, and that I would take it kindly if the maids stopped crossing themselves when they dust in there." "I have never said mad." "You have thought it in excellent silence for 4 years." Rayburn lowered the lamp. "May I ask who she is?" And there it was. The one question the Duke of Marlow, master of 11,000 acres, a seat in the Lords, and a fortune that made careful men careful indeed, could not answer. "No," he said, "I do not know her name. I have never known it." He knew other things. He knew the water had been black and moving fast that March night at the ford below Marlow, that his carriage had gone over with a sound like a tree splitting, that the cold had taken his breath so completely he had not been able to cry out. He knew a hand had closed on his collar. He knew a voice, young and furious and absurdly calm, had said close to his ear, "Hold to me. Do not thank me until you can stand." He had not been able to stand for 3 days. By then she was gone. He remembered no gown, no bonnet, no name. Only that face turned sideways in the dark against the lantern light of the toll house, and the way her chin had come up when the tollkeeper's wife scolded her for ruining her only pair of shoes. 4 years, and the face would not leave him. His hand had learned it before his memory had. He had begun to paint it because painting was the only way to look at it long enough. "Cover it," he said again, more gently, "and go to bed, Rayburn." 2 weeks later, she knocked on his door. Not the great door. The Duke of Marlow's great door was for bishops and creditors and his aunt. The knocking came at the tradesmen's entrance on the kitchen court, at 9 in the morning, and he only heard of it because he happened to be crossing the back stair with mud to his knees and a lame hound at his heel, and because his housekeeper's voice carried. "We do not buy at the door. Try the vicarage." "It is not begging, ma'am. It is work I am offering, not asking charity for. I mend lace. I can turn a flounce so the join does not show, and I letter and copy a fair hand, and I ask nothing until the work is seen. There is no lace in this house wants mending." "There is a great deal of lace in this house wants mending. I have seen the Marchcroft carriage in town." The Duke stopped on the stair, with his hand on the rail. He knew the voice the way one knows a bell struck in another room, young, furious, absurdly calm. He came down into the kitchen court bareheaded, and the scullery maids scattered like starlings, and the housekeeper made a sound of pure horror at the state of his boots, and none of it mattered, because the woman at the gate had turned round. Gray eyes, a plain dark braid pinned up under a bonnet that had been retrimmed at least twice by someone patient, a chin that came up. "Your Grace," said his housekeeper, "I was sending her off." "You were not," Alaric said. His voice did not sound like his own. "Madam, your name." She looked at him a moment too long, and he watched the color go out of her face and then come back all at once, high and hot. "Shawcross," she said, "Verity Shawcross." Verity. 4 years of unnamed canvases, and the name had been sitting somewhere in Sussex all along, wearing a mended bonnet. "You know me," he said. "I know of you." She said it very steadily. "Everyone in the county knows of you." That is not what I asked. The basket on her arm was shaking. She set it down on the cobbles so that it would stop, and straightened, and said, "If your grace means to accuse me of something, I would rather hear it plainly at the gate than politely in a parlor." "I mean to accuse you of pulling me out of the ford at Marlow 4 years ago in March," the Duke said, "and then of vanishing, which I consider the greater offense." The whole kitchen court had gone silent. Somewhere a pump dripped. Verity Shawcross closed her eyes briefly, the way a person does when a long-dreaded bill is finally presented. "I did not vanish," she said. "I went home. There is a difference, though I grant it looks the same from a great house." He brought her in. His housekeeper's face said this would be discussed with his aunt within the hour, and he found he did not care. He put her in the small library where the fire was already lit, and he told a footman to bring chocolate and bread and butter, and he stood at the window with his back to her until he trusted himself. "You were 16, he said. 17. You are 21 now. Your Grace is very good at sums." He turned. She was sitting on the edge of a chair as though she intended to be asked to leave it, hands folded, the untouched chocolate steaming at her elbow. "Eat," he said. "Please. I have wanted to ask you a question for 4 years, and I would rather ask it of a woman who has had her breakfast." Something flickered at the corner of her mouth. She ate. She ate the way people eat who have learned not to seem hungry, and he made himself look at the fire instead, because his throat had gone tight and it would not do. "Why did you not come to me?" he asked at last. "I sent men out. I had the toll-keeper questioned twice. I put a notice in the county paper offering a reward, and half the parish came forward to claim it, and not one of them could tell me what you said to me in the water." "I know about the notice." "Then in God's name why?" "Because of this," Verity said, and reached into the front of her bodice and drew out a cord, and on the cord was his signet ring. The Duke of Marlow crossed the room and stopped a yard from her chair, and did not touch it. Marlow gold, the hawk and the broken spear. He had assumed 4 years ago that it had gone to the bottom of the ford with his hat and his pride. "I pressed that into your hand," he said slowly. "On the toll-house floor. I remember doing it. I could not speak, so I gave you the only thing on me worth anything." "You gave a duke's signet to a farrier's daughter with wet shoes," she said. "And when I got home my father took one look at it and went white and said, 'Verity, if you go up to that house with this in your pocket, they will not thank you. They will say you stripped it off a drowning man.' And he was not wrong, was he? Your Grace may pretend otherwise, but he was not wrong." He could not say she was wrong. That was the shame of it. He had lived 38 years among people who would have said exactly that, and said it prettily, over cards. "So you kept it?" "I kept it 4 years. Her chin came up again, and he felt the strangest lurch, like a step missed on a stair, because his hand had painted that exact angle 9 times. "And I will tell your Grace the whole of it, since we are being plain. 2 years ago my mother was ill, and the apothecary would not come again without money, and I took that ring to a pawnbroker in Chichester, and I pawned it for £4, and I hated myself all the way home." "Verity." "I got it back," she said fiercely. "It took me 3 years and 1 month. I mended lace, and I lettered handbills, and I copied a lawyer's papers by candle until my eyes ran. And 11 weeks ago I put down the last of it, and I carried it out of that shop, and I did not sleep for being glad. It is not mine. It was never mine. I only would not have it said that it was sold." The Duke of Marlow sat down. It was not a graceful thing. The chair was simply there, and his legs had stopped arguing for him. "And you came here to give it back?" "I came here," Verity said, "to sell mending, because my father is dead since Candlemas, and the forge is let to another man, and I have a cottage until Michaelmas and nothing after it. The ring I meant to leave with your housekeeper in a paper, with no name on it." She looked at her hands. "I did not expect the master of the house to be in the kitchen court in muddy boots." "I am generally in the kitchen court in muddy boots. It is the only part of the house where no one wishes to marry me." He heard her startled breath of laughter, and it did something to him that 4 years of careful society had not managed. "Miss Shawcross, do you know what I have been doing for 4 years? Being the terror of the county, by all accounts." "Painting you," said the Duke of Marlow. He took her to the north passage and pulled the sheets off, one after another, and the cold light off the lawn came in and found 9 versions of her face. She did not speak for a long while. He watched her instead of the paintings, which was, he supposed, the whole of his character laid out on a plate. "That one is wrong," she said unsteadily, pointing. "My nose does not do that." "Your nose does precisely that when you are about to say something unforgivable." "And this one," she stopped. She put her fingers to her mouth. "This one has the lantern behind, from the toll house." "That is the only one I painted from memory," he said. "The rest I painted from that one, and each time I told myself I was correcting an error, and each time I was only looking at you longer. My aunt believes it a derangement. My physician believes it a nervous humor of the brain. I believe I owed a debt I could not pay to a person I could not name, and my hand would not let me forget her." He made himself say the rest. "That is what I believed until this morning. Now I find I am obliged to be honest about it, which is a good deal more frightening." Verity Shawcross turned from the canvases and looked at him, and her eyes were bright and appalled. "Your Grace, I am a farrier's daughter." "You are the reason there is a Duke of Marlow at all," he said, "and not a monument in the chapel with a very dull inscription." The Dowager Lady Marchcroft, his aunt, arrived at Marlow before dinner, having been sent for by somebody in the household who had considered it a Christian duty. She came into the drawing-room where Verity sat with her mended bonnet in her lap, looked at her for the space of 3 heartbeats, and delivered her verdict to the Duke as though the girl were a piece of furniture. "She has seen the portraits, Alaric, or heard of them. Half the county has heard of them. And now here is a face at your door with a story to fit, and a ring, no doubt, that any pawnbroker's boy could have described to her. And you," her voice cracked, which he had not expected, "you who have not laughed since your brother died, you are going to hand her the keys." "Ask her what she said to me in the water," the Duke said. "I beg your pardon. You have heard me tell it twice and refuse to repeat it. I never printed it in the notice. It is not in any account. Ask her." His aunt turned. Verity rose because she had been raised to rise, and stood with her chin at that angle. "Well," said Lady Marchcroft. "I said, 'Hold to me,'" Verity answered. "And I said, 'Do not thank me until you can stand.' And then I said something your ladyship will not care for, which was that if he died in my arms after all that trouble, I should never forgive him." The old woman's hand went to the back of a chair. "That is not in any account," she said. "No, ma'am. You were 17. "I was strong," Verity said simply. "I worked a forge bellows since I was 9. He was not so heavy as he thinks he is." And the Duke of Marlow, in his own drawing-room, put his hand over his mouth and discovered he was laughing, and that it hurt, the way a limb hurts when the blood comes back into it. He did not propose that week. He was 38, and he had learned, painfully, that wanting a thing very much is not the same as being owed it. Instead, he made her an offer of employment she was permitted to refuse, the cataloguing of the Marlow Library in a fair hand, at a wage his steward called extravagant, and his aunt called a scandal. Verity read the terms twice, asked for one alteration, that the wage be reduced and the cottage rent be paid to Michaelmas instead, since her mother could not be moved, and signed. She worked in the long room with the tall windows. He found reasons to pass through it that would not have deceived a spaniel. She caught him at it within 4 days. "Your Grace has walked through this room 11 times since Tuesday. There is no other route to the stables." "There are 3. Miss Shawcross, are you scolding a duke?" "I am recording him," she said, dipping her pen. "Item: one nobleman, condition worn, provenance uncertain, frequently mislaid." He courted her openly after that, and let the county talk. He took her mother a physician, and did not mention it. He walked with Verity down to the ford in September, and stood on the new stone bridge he had built the year after the flood, and told her he had built it because he could not bear the sound of that water, and she said the sound was the same, and that he had simply given the parish a bridge because he could not give one girl a thank you. He conceded the point. He had begun to enjoy conceding points. It was a novel sensation, like a window opened in a shut room. At Michaelmas he asked her, on the bridge, with the water going brown and loud beneath them. "I have 9 portraits of a woman whose name I did not know," the Duke of Marlow said. "I should like, before I die, to have one of my wife. Marry me, Verity." She was quiet so long that the cold got into his hands. "They will say I climbed," she said at last. "They will say it for 30 years. They will say it for 5, and then they will say they always knew you would be Duchess, and they will be lying, and we shall let them." He took the cord from around her neck gently and slid the signet from it and put the ring back where it had been 4 years into her hand, closing her fingers over it. "Keep it. It has been yours since the Toll House floor. I only want the hand." "Then you have it," Verity Shawcross said. "And you always did, and I have been extremely tired of pretending otherwise." They were married in the chapel at Marlow in November, with the parish crammed into the back pews, and the tollkeeper's wife weeping loudly in the 3rd row, and Lady Marchcroft, who had come round in the way of formidable women, entirely, and without ever admitting she had been wrong, standing as witness in grey silk. The 9 portraits came down from the North Passage. 8 went into the muniment room, wrapped and labelled in Verity's own fair hand. Studies, unknown lady, 1809 to 1813. The 9th, the one with the lantern behind her, the Duke hung in the small library where the fire was always lit, at a height where a woman sitting in the good chair could look up at it and be annoyed by her own nose. Years later, a nephew asked him why the Duchess of Marlow kept a gentleman's signet ring on a cord instead of in the case with the rest, and the Duke, grey now, and still given to muddy boots in the kitchen court, looked down the table at his wife with the whole of his heart in plain view. "Because I gave it to her once when I could not speak," he said, "and she carried it 4 years to keep my name clean when I did not know she existed. There is not a jewel in England worth the wearing beside it." Verity told him he was becoming sentimental in his old age. He said that he had painted her face 9 times before he ever learned her name, and that he intended to spend what remained of his life being sentimental with considerable thoroughness, and that she had, unfortunately for her, agreed to it in writing.